go hit the record button. So yeah, so I usually record these, although it will be available on both Facebook and YouTube. I usually record these so that I can cut out the 30-minute the countdown. Because nobody likes to watch that, even though there's some interesting music and stuff going on. But nobody wants to watch that, so I usually edit it down. But that's all I edit out is that beginning leader. And if there are mistakes, if there are issues, everybody sees it live. Live TV, folks. There will be issues, but on the plus side, eventually I will get good enough at this that hopefully no one will know that it's just me. They'll think that I've got this, I've got this great background behind me. It's really just a green screen, as Sparrow saw. This is all special, smoke and mirrors, literally. Nothing up my sleeve. But
it's glamour.
Huh?
It's a glamour.
Yeah, it's a glamour. Exactly. It's exactly what it is. And so, hopefully with a little bit of time to practice, and I'm doing some other, not quite this, well, actually it's complicated, but in a different way. I'm doing other streaming. I'm streaming a game on Twitch also, because the more I do this, the better I get at it. And if I can find enough guests, I will be willing to do this more than once a month. It's a matter of getting guests who, can schedule some time to talk live on the schedule of the show. Because you can't have a live show at various times and various days. Well, you can't have any show at various times and various days because nobody will watch.
No,
that's the networks found that out 40 years ago when they started moving things around. Oh, we'll put this on a Friday night when nobody's home. That way it'll never survive. So we go through this. We try and work out the kinks and on good days, as much trouble as you and I had getting an image of you to come through, this is actually pretty good.
I'm happy with it.
I'm pretty happy, and we've got the live is much better, says Dean. Yeah, I agree. If nothing else, it may be a disaster on this end. At least it's entertaining on that end. I spent an hour this afternoon live streaming a test, and I put up there. This is a test to see how well it works on Facebook, and I just played a bunch of music. Is really all I did, and music and sound effects is what I played.
I'm a doctor, not an engineer.
Just stupid shit. Because it was a test to see how long of a stream we could do on Facebook. And whether or not it would come through clear and how it sounded and all that. And I learned a few lessons from listening to the stream afterwards. But we go through this, we tweak, we add, and you've done the same thing, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we have to figure out what levels people are at, and then when you have guests as well, and they're going through Skype or they're going through pretty much only Skype is the way that we have our guests, unless they're right in the studio. You've always got to be playing with things. I mean, technology is a great tool. It's also finicky.
Yes.
You have to, one button, we saw that today. One thing was not clicked and we didn't have audio. You just unclick that and it works out so much better. But it is playing with the equipment and playing with what you know. And one thing that I've learned is that I'm an ummer. And
yeah.
Remember that when I'm speaking publicly and it can't be edited, to lose the ums.
Well, and I found that the ums come when I'm trying to think of something to say. If I'm having a conversation like you and I are having right now, I say a lot less because I don't have to necessarily think about what it is I'm trying to say. I simply have a conversation.
Yeah, this is pretty easy conversation now. Are you going to get to some meaty stuff?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. In fact, I'm just, going over the fact that I'm an idiot.
You've got two.
No, you're not. And people, I hope the listeners understand that it's technology. You're dealing with all kinds of new. You've got a mixer and you're working with a laptop, and then you're working with at least one other program, and you are putting background on your green screen, and there are so many technical things that you're doing, and maybe other people can't see that, but I can attest to there are about 5 or 6 at least things going on your desk right now.
You should see this setup. I literally have the Matrix setup here. I have 4 screens in front of me because 2 screens weren't enough for all of the windows I have open, and even with 4, I've got stuff on every one of them. And it's like, okay, now I got. You'll see me looking around, and it looks like I'm looking all over the place. I'm actually looking at stuff that is connected with running this live stream just to make sure it's still working. Like over here, I'm looking at the Facebook, and then I click over here to get to the YouTube, and because they're on the same browser in different tabs, and it's like, okay, they're both going. That's good. We're still streaming. That's a good thing. But yeah, it's difficult, and it takes practice, and takes there's a high learning curve. There's no school out there to teach you how to do this.
No, you have to learn it all on your own, often other podcasters will help, but that's unless they're in the same room as you, they can't see what you're looking at and what links are being made and whatever. Even me, I've got the iPad, and if people are noticing that I'm looking down, every once in a while I'm looking down at my iPhone to see if anything has happened on the live chat.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of technology going on in this space right now.
Absolutely.
In the virtual space as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's difficult because like I said, there's nobody teaches you how to do this. You gotta figure it out on your own. So you and I, we have some history. We haven't seen each other in 10 years, but we have some history.
Mm-hmm. We've actually met in person.
Yes, which is more than I can say. So for some of the girlfriends I've had on the internet, you and I have actually met, and we never dated.
No.
But when I was putting this together, you and I were emailing back and forth about what we wanted to do, what we wanted to talk about, and I wanted to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit on podcasting and live streaming, because it all the people out there see is what what goes out live. They don't see any of the background, and you and I are aware of the background, and so having that conversation, I think, I don't know if it helped anybody, but I hopefully they know that there's a lot more to it than just simply getting in front of a web camera with a microphone and talking. And certainly the same goes for podcasting.
Oh, for sure. There's a lot more behind it, and it's exciting, and it's fun to do, and it's a great service to the community.
And now you're the famous person.
Pardon me?
Now you're the famous person on the radio.
Well,
okay, you and Mojo.
Famous, but more well known.
Okay, we'll go with that. Because that was one of the things when you and I first met at DragonFest, you seem to have this complex of awe. You're famous. It's like, no, I'm just this guy.
I was starstruck. You were the first radio or show or podcasters that we had met, as far as I recall. And, we only met you. We didn't meet Winterhawk.
Right, she wasn't there.
No, she wasn't at that festival. But, yeah, I was starstruck, and Mojo said, you need to do this, and I know you can do it. And so I went with my little... I think, did I have the digital recorder?
Yep.
I brought the digital recorder, and I think we still had the lapel pin microphone.
Yep, we did the interview. We did the interview in my tent at my camp. Mm-hmm. Like the tent was going to be soundproof or something.
It wasn't too bad. There were some voices, and it was early days. It was early days in the podcasting or internet radio days, and it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out great, and you guys are still going, so obviously it did work out. So when we were doing the emailing back and forth, I asked you if there was anything you wanted to bring up specifically on this podcast, and you said, yes, there is. So why don't you go ahead and talk about this issue that you are very passionate about?
Yeah, I am very passionate about it. In November of 2014, there are a lot of things that led up to it. There's a whole lifetime of what led up to this day and what has happened since that day. But the few days before November 19th, 2014, I had found out that on the mountain that we live on a mountain called Burnaby Mountain, and some of your listeners may have heard of it or may not have heard about it because it became quite
infamous.
Yeah, kind of infamous, but it was a moving point for what seems to be a movement. First, you had the Idle No More happening with the First Nations people and social justice and that kind of thing. And then in November of 2014, I found out that Kinder Morgan, the Texas oil company, wanted to twin the pipeline that is already running from Edmonton, Alberta, across the Rocky Mountains through BC to Burnaby Mountain. There's a terminal and a tank farm on this mountain that I live on. And Kinder Morgan wants to twin that pipeline to move bitumen through. And bitumen is dirty oil. It's gross. You can't move tar sands oil through a pipeline, so you have to add a whole bunch of caustic chemicals to it to make it be able to move through the pipeline. They want to twin this pipeline, which would, like I said, go from Alberta to BC. And if you know your map, let's think far side of Wyoming to Washington across the mountains, about that long of a pipeline.
So about half the country.
A good third.
Yeah.
A good third. And then they want to increase the size of the tank farm by increasing the size of the tanks themselves and the number of tanks that are on. Right now there are 13 tanks on the mountain. That's about half a mile from our house. It's about a kilometer and 1.2 kilometers. And they want to increase that. Now, if there was a spillover or a tank breach or any sort of thing happened at a tank farm, the elementary school that is mere meters away from it would be obliterated, and you wouldn't be able to evacuate the children. There's only one road going in and out of where we live, and also the tank farm. In twinning the pipeline and increasing the tank farm volume also means that tanker traffic would triple on the Burrard Inlet on the Pacific Ocean. And at the Burrard Inlet, if you know where Vancouver, Canada is, it's the inlet that goes from English Bay into the interior, British Columbia. And we're on the Burrard Inlet on the other side of the mountain that we live on. So you can see that these things are kind of scary and potentially damaging and terrifying. Let's just add the fact that we also live in an earthquake zone, and we're on a mountain.
Yeah. You know, and I did a little bit of research, a little bit of reading. I won't say research, but some reading. And what it sounds like they're doing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they already have one pipe that was built in the 1950s, and it either goes through town or just outside of town. And so their idea, Kinder Morgan's idea was, well, we'll avoid all of the uproar that will happen by avoiding the town altogether, and we'll go through the mountain instead.
Yeah. They thought they would trail through the mountain with their pipes.
Yeah.
We live on this mountain, and there's a university at the top of the mountain, which also only has one road in and one road out.
Okay. And I thought there was also some wetlands or some kind of national, I don't want to say national park, but something like that at the top?
It's a conservation area. The whole area that we live on is a conservation area.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be touched at all.
Right. And one of the articles I read talked about how they had gone up to the mountain and started drilling boreholes to find out what's this mountain made out of, and is it solid enough to drill through so we can put a pipe?
All right, yes, and we were against that drilling because they were going to be drilling in the conservation land, in a park, on unceded First Nations territory. When I say unceded First Nations territory, I mean that the First Nations never lost this land. They were never in a war. There was never an altercation. The settlers came in and took over. And the First Nations people were of the mind, 500 and 150 years ago, depending on the history, they had it, everybody was welcome. Everybody could live here together and coexisting. But so it's unceded. It's never been lost land. It still belongs to the First Nations people, technically.
Okay, so this is land that the First Nations, I won't say own because they don't tend to think of it in that terms.
They're stewards of the land.
Yeah, this is land that they oversee.
Yes, they're stewards of the land. They oversee it. They protect it for 7 generations or more is what the plan is. So, like I had said, for that week up until then, we had been hearing that they were going to start the drilling of the boreholes, and there was an injunction that the protectors had to leave the area. Well, on this area, they had built kind of a sanctuary, and there was a sacred fire in the sanctuary. And it was approximately where one of the boreholes were going to be. For that week before November 19th, I had gone up every day and I had learned a little bit more, and I had talked to the elders and I had talked to the young people that were sharing information. I talked to the scientists and I talked to different police officers, the RCMP, and I learned lots of things, and it was a lot of information. And I made a promise to the elders that I would help protect this sacred fire if there were arrests or if they tried to remove us from the land. So November 19th in the morning, my sister and I went up to the park. It's only, by walking, it's about 10 minutes straight up the hill. Or mountain. Mojo calls it an ambitious hill, but it really isn't.
Okay.
It's just a really small mountain. But it is a mountain. So I went up to the area where the protectors were, and we were standing around and we're making posters and just the camaraderie and learning about what was happening and learning about social justice and learning about all kinds of things that I did not know about. I had been asleep, is how I put it. Well, that morning, I told Mojo that I was prepared to do whatever I had to do to protect our mountain and to protect our home and to protect the water. And while I was standing there, and we had made lots of plans and whatever, the protectors and whatever, all of a sudden, 40 RCMP trudging up the hill, marching, but in fast march. Boom, 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 boom. 40 of them coming, and they're coming right for us. And I looked at my friends and I said, they're coming, they're coming. And so there were about 10 of us, and they said, gather round, and we all linked arms, and we were protecting a number of people in the middle who we knew were likely to get arrested before us because they were going to get arrested. Well, what happened was they said that we had passed an injunction line that the court had set up, and that we were now in lockdown, and we were being civilly disobedient. And the 10 of us slowly got arrested. And I was the very last one to be arrested out of that group of 10. And as I was sitting there, I looked up into the trees. And the light was dappling down. But there was no sound. The birds had stopped singing. The leaves just seemed to have stopped moving. And this is a beautiful place where the birds always sing. And there were people chanting in the back and saying, we love you, and all the beautiful things. And I'm sitting there, and there's RCMP surrounding me. And then a fence, because I was in our sanctuary. And then there are people all on the outside of the sanctuary. And they're all, saying, I love you, and shouting. And my sister's out in the outside, and she's saying, Mom says she loves you. Mojo says he loves you. And then all of a sudden, something happened, and the spirit of the mountain kind of came up through me and spoke to me, and I can't really explain to anybody. I tried to, and I can't explain what happened, but it was like this vortex of energies going around, and it was the mountain spirit, or Apu, which I now call it because I learned a little bit more about what had happened. And the mountain spoke to me, and Gaia spoke to me, and Gaia called me, and I had, my matron goddess had totally been a different goddess until this moment, but Gaia spoke to me, and the mountain spoke to me, and kind of said, this is what you have to do, and this is what your purpose is, and you're here to protect the land and the water, and food security is your thing, water, food security, and the land. And my inherent work is to help the First Nations and be an ally to protect this land and make sure that we have fresh water and the ability to grow food. Because this is a crazy world, and whether you believe in climate change or not, it exists, and things are going to change.
Well, yeah, and it's not a matter of believing in climate change or not. It's a matter of do you accept it or do you deny it? But now there's a comment on the YouTube chat about eminent domain. Do you guys have eminent domain up in Canada?
I don't think so, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so
a little bit more to me, I might
all right, so in the U.S., the government has this thing they call eminent domain, which is basically they'll go, if they want something, if they want a piece of land, they'll go to the person who owns that land and they'll say, we would like to use, for example, Keystone XL Pipeline is a perfect example. So there may be people who are not willing to sell out to the people who are running the pipeline through, and so they may not want to sell out to the company. So the government will come in and say, well, we need this land in order to run this pipeline, so we're going to offer you what we believe it's worth, and it can be what it's valued at, but sometimes it's not. But if the owner does not accept that offer, they will invoke eminent domain and they'll say, well, okay, we're going to just go ahead and take it.
I think there may be something like that. I'm not sure if that's what it's called, but I don't know how many of your listeners watched anything to do with our politics that just happened. We have a new Prime Minister, and it's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who we just kindly call Justin because he's a really nice guy, but he is a politician and two-faced. But anyway, where I'm going, during his election, one of his election promises was that none of these projects would go through without First Nations consultation and approval. No, it doesn't. That is what has to happen. And they don't have permissions from the communities, from First Nations, the city of Burnaby, where Burnaby Mountain is, where the tank farms are, where the terminal is, and where the pipeline would end up. The city has said no. Our own mayor has said he will stand in front of the bulldozers and be arrested. He has argued against the RCMP. When the Burnaby Mountain arrests happened. Now, I need to tell you what happened on November 20th after we were arrested and my thing happened. I call it my brain exploding or my heart exploding or the goddess or the mountain talking to me or whatever. The day after that, over 100 people got arrested. They crossed the injunction line and got arrested in support of what we were doing and what we're trying to accomplish. And that was from a woman near 90 right down to an 11-year-old child crossed with her parents' permission. Now, the 11-year-old wasn't arrested. She wasn't taken away by anyone. She was, her parents were cited, I think. But she had crossed and made some valid points. But the eminent domain, I'm not sure if we have that. But I think we have something similar.
Okay, well, now, so when when you first brought this up, my first thought was, okay, because you were talking about, there's no need for this because we have other forms of energy, we've got solar, we've got, and which is true. The problem that, the first thought I had was, well, yeah, but the problem here is that coal and oil are so cheap relative to those other forms of energy that until the price comes down on solar or whatever, no one's going to want to spend that extra money. But when I started looking into it, what I realized was that this energy, the thing that you haven't pointed out yet is that this oil is the whole reason they want to move it is so that they can put it onto ships and ship it to Asia.
To China.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not for Canadian consumption. It's not for, well, it is partly for American consumption because the American military machine does take a lot of Canadian oil.
Mm-hmm.
Tons.
Yeah, and so
most of our oil is going to your military machine.
Yeah, and so what they're doing, and these are oil sands. So they it's similar to what they called back in the 70s, what they called oil shale. It is the really thick stuff stuck in. Literally stuck in rock because they got all the easy oil out decades ago, and so
this dirty.
Right, and so it's gotten to the point where where when they could just suck it out like a straw, it was too expensive and too much trouble to pull it out at that point. But once they got rid of all that easy oil, now and when oil got up to $100 a barrel, now it becomes feasible to frack, which is basically fracturing the rock strata that is trapping that oil in those oil sands, and now they can pull it out, but it's still not pure oil. It's still got a bunch of that impurity in it, which is what you were talking about. So it's really thick, viscous, to the point where they have to put fracking liquid and other things in to thin it out to shove it through a pipeline.
Well, and if it spills, again, if that bitumen were to spill anywhere on its way to Burnaby Mountain or at the tank farms, the hydrocarbons that would be released from that bitumen are so poisonous and so nauseous. They're awful. And again, elementary school, 50 to 100 meters away from the tank farms.
Right. Now, I have to say that a pipeline is going to be a lot safer than what they call a rolling pipeline, which is a train full of tank cars. Because, you get a tank car derail and all of a sudden all of that stuff goes. But the fact is they have this pipeline that's 60 years old, and what they want to do is they want to put, based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like they want to put a pipeline twice the size in because they want to end up with 3 times what they're currently pumping. Mm-hmm. And currently they have 5 ships a month that dock to take these oil sands. They want to bump it up to 34 ships a month. And they're all headed to China, to Asia, where they will refine those oil sands into something usable.
Exactly. Well, they refine it. And that's another thing that Alberta could be doing differently. Instead of, I have so much family in Alberta, and they're all in the oil sands. They're all in oil. They're either First Nations or they're in oil, oddly enough. And I understand the economic part behind it because now Alberta is high unemployment because of the prices of the oil. But I don't know if your listeners understand that at current consumption rates, bear in mind that population is increasing and materialism is increasing and capitalism is increasing. But with current consumption, there's only 40 years left of oil. So what I'd like to see is that oil being reserved to make, because we still need to make the solar, all these other things. It should be reserved, the oil should be reserved for important things that we could be divesting from the fossil fuels for energy and moving towards more sustainable energy and using what oil we have.
Well, okay, so I would disagree with the fact we've only got 40 years of oil. They said that back in the 70s, and that was 40 years ago. We have, when you count the oil sands and the shale, we're sitting on the largest oil reserve in the world. It's just that it's a lot harder to get out than what they can get out of Saudi Arabia. Now, we've got a comment from Beat Girl 19. It says, on their website, Kinder Morgan writes, extensive engagement has taken place in communities and along the proposed route and marine corridor. We have engaged in open and meaningful discussions with landowners, Aboriginal groups, communities, and stakeholders, and will continue to do so throughout the project timeline. It says, the way you describe it, this never happened. Can you clarify this?
What they're doing is they're going, it's a little bit interesting to explain. There's a lot that's involved. Sorry, I have to plug this back in or I'm going to lose you. Okay. There's a little bit more involved with that than than they're saying, because they're going to the Indian, the First Nations, but they're going to elected chiefs rather than hereditary chiefs. And elected chiefs, that's a whole colonial thing on its own, and it's really hard to get into. But they are not listening to the people. Kinder Morgan is not listening. When Burnaby, the people of Burnaby and the people of Vancouver, and most of the small towns or small cities around, they're saying no, they don't want it. And Kinder Morgan is going ahead and they're drilling boreholes, and they're clear cutting, and they're doing all these things in preparation for something they don't have permission for.
Okay, so now one of the articles I read talked about how Kinder Morgan actually left early. They had planned to bore 2 holes, and they only ended up boring one about 120 feet deep, which they then said, well, this gives us all the data we need to determine whether it's a suitable site to run that to run the pipeline. And it kind of inferred, the article kind of inferred that they had left early due to some sort of court injunction.
Well, because they had to drop all the charges against people that were arrested, myself included, because the injunction was wrong. The coordinates that they had were wrong, and they arrested us all in the wrong spot.
Yeah, that was something else I saw was that they were talking about the fact that so you're actually clarified something, because they talked about a case was thrown out of court because the GPS coordinates were wrong, and so what you're saying is that was the
122 cases were thrown out.
Okay, so all of those cases were thrown out because the wrong coordinates for the spot where you guys were arrested and where the boreholes were?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they weren't able to do it. Now, I don't know what happened with borehole number 1. Borehole number 2 is where I was arrested.
Okay.
I'm not exactly certain what happened with borehole 1. I know that there were 13 trees legally cut down to drill that borehole. You can't cut down trees in our neighborhood because it's a conservation area, and you're just not allowed to. I mean, we have a forest out there right now, and there's not a darn thing we can do with any of those plants. We can't cut them down, we can't take away any ferns, we can't kill anything. We have to leave it exactly the same, unless the tree's going to die, and then an arborist comes and takes it down, and there's approved arborists that you can employ to do that. But Kinder Morgan illegally cut down 13 trees that they weren't supposed to, and their coordinates were incorrect, and they're just going on ahead without permission.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Go. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm actually the Facebook feed stopped, so I am putting in the address for the YouTube channel so that they can watch there. So basically, what you're telling me is that they're telling us is that they did a bunch of stuff legally, as far as we know, that you wouldn't, as a homeowner, wouldn't be able to do because of the fact that you are in the land is protected. It's a nature preserve.
Actually, they were fined for it because it's legal. It's illegal for too.
Okay,
so they were fined for the trees, and they had to make restitution. They've since replanted some trees with some help from the community to make sure that the plants were diverse enough and the appropriate trees for
I was
that.
wondering what constituted reimbursement for cutting down however many years old trees that they did. In that area they could have been, well, depending on where they're at, could have been several hundred years old. Yeah. So basically, as I understand it, this is a battle between now. The articles I read, and they're written for sensationalism because, well, they're articles. But it's made it sound like you guys are the only ones actually fighting this. Nobody else is worried about it. Nobody else has any problems with it. First of all, is that true? And if so, why do you guys have such a problem with it?
It's not true.
Okay.
It's most of the province, all the small cities in the area They don't want it. We're not the only ones. We're the only ones that are going out and putting our liberty on the line for it. And I will continue to put my liberty on the line for it.
Okay, but this pipeline, as you pointed out, is going across at least a third of the continent. Did anybody else along that route?
There's all along the BC route, most people don't want it.
Okay.
Once you get across the Rocky Mountains and you're onto BC and to the coast, those people don't want it. Alberta wants it because it's money.
Sure.
It's no money for BC. BC's not going to. There is no.
Right, because it originates in Alberta, right?
Yeah, it comes from Alberta, and Albertans don't, except for working at the plants and at the tar sands and stuff. Alberta doesn't really make that much money because these companies don't pay taxes.
Okay.
They do not pay the appropriate taxes.
Well, and so basically the reason
they're American companies.
Well, of course. Yeah, that's why they don't pay taxes, because they're not Canadian. They don't pay Canadian taxes because they're American companies. That I understand that. But the people in Alberta, they don't mind because it starts there, so it's their oil.
And it's money.
And so they get paid for they get paid for what comes out the other end where you're at. And so and I have, anybody who knows me understands I'm a capitalist. I have no problem with free market. I think that the government should get out of the markets completely and let them do what they're going to do, and it would be much better for everybody. It's the government screwing with the markets that causes all of the ups and downs that we've been seeing over the last 10 years.
Screwing with the governments, if you ask me. But it's different. But it is the corporations buying. You look at your two brothers there. I call them the Koch brothers. I'm not sure if they're the Koch brothers or
Koch brothers.
Koch brothers, but they're dicks to me.
It's spelled Koch, but it's pronounced Coke.
Yeah. Well, I'll call them.
They pronounce it Coke.
Yeah, they can. Well.
But and yes, and that's what they do. They're big in oil and a bunch of other stuff, and they're some of the richest people in the world. But honestly, where I have this problem is that because all right, so they started on the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. That's where this pipeline starts. And those of us here,
right in the north central part of Alberta.
Yeah, so and those of us here around the Denver area, the Front Range, we know how big those mountains are. So if they got through that would have been. I would have thought the Rocky Mountains would have been the engineering, the hard part of the engineering. So to go through this tiny little hill, and I suspect, I have not seen the mountain you guys live on, but I suspect it's something like Green Mountain here, which is basically the beginning of the foothills. They call it a mountain, but it's really not.
I wouldn't call it the beginning of the foothills.
No, Green Mountain is.
Yeah.
Green Mountain is.
But, I don't know Green Mountain, but
yeah.
This is about around 1,000 feet high. It's just a mountain.
Right, exactly. A mountain is anything 1,000 feet or higher. So it is just barely a mountain. But so I find it interesting that this tiny little mountain is the place that they're having their hardest troubles, in that it's not the geography or the geology that's causing the problems. It's the people in and around what I saw described in some of the articles as a bedroom community.
And that's odd because if you look at the map, we're right beside Vancouver, like right beside, and it's part of Metro Vancouver.
Right. And so
bedroom community.
Well,
it's part of a major city that has over. What I
read was that Burnaby was a affluent. They call it bedroom community in that it's affluent and has some money and.
I know which article you read.
I bet you do.
I know exactly which article you read, and it was written by somebody who only saw part of the mountain. The part of the mountain that we live on is because of the conservation. It's co-ops. So it's co-ops and townhouses. There's no single family housing here at all. It's all kind of, I don't know what if you would call them row housing.
Yeah, townhomes, condominiums, that sort of thing.
Yeah, they're townhomes.
Yeah.
And I would say that it's probably middle class, possibly lower to middle class on this part of the mountain. On the other part of the mountain, yeah, it is affluent. There are rich people, but most of the people who live on the mountain are probably middle class or slightly lower.
Okay, yeah. So it's a working community. It's a working workers. Okay, so and honestly, that
teachers and the tradesmen
and honestly, that shouldn't play into it at all, really, because you would think if it was affluent, they would just be able to spend their way out of getting it. But really, the whole thing comes down to is the fact that someone nearly half a continent away, several someones, is wanting to send their product, we'll call it a product, or at least their material, to where you guys live, and offload it into boats, which we know how safe those are after the what was it, the Valdez.
Right, and we had an oil spill in English Bay last year. Actually, 1 year anniversary was April 9th.
Yeah.
And it was a small spill, and we don't know how to clean it up. It's
right.
not yet. So, and it was a small spill. It was like oil leaking from a vessel that wasn't holding oil. It was the oil for that vessel.
Okay, and
yeah.
And a new pipe should be sound. I mean, if they're doing their jobs right, they should send pipes through there to make sure that it's nice and tight, airtight, so that nothing spills out.
Then Grey Heart, it doesn't happen. There's just even in the last week, you can look up oil. It was, I'm not sure if it was Kinder Morgan's, but it was one of the oil companies, and I believe the oil pipeline was in the States, and the computers that were supposed to tell them if there was an oil spill didn't, and it took human and the oil had been spilling for at least a week.
Okay. Now, and I understand that things don't always work out the way they're supposed to, and I'm not gonna. I work with computers in my day job. I know how that works. But I'm not saying that an oil pipeline is safe, as far as there are likely to be spills, there are likely to be leaks, there are likely to, at some point in the life of this pipeline. So I understand from if I'm getting the gist of this right, that's really what people there on the mountain are concerned about, is what happens if and when, or when it leaks. How would they clean it up? Who would pay for it? And then how would it affect the wildlife that is in that area? Because it's a nature preserve.
Yeah, we have bears, we have coyotes, cougars, raccoons, deer.
All right,
whatever.
Now the local mayor is against this. You
pointed Derek Ford. Yeah.
And
also mayor of Vancouver City, North Van, West Van. I think Delta's not against it, because Delta, if they reroute the pipeline, which they're thinking of doing, not routing it through Burnaby, but by a neighboring city called Delta, which is wetlands. They have to put the pipeline through wetlands, which is another idiotic idea. We live in an earthquake zone. Come on, people.
Right. And I understand that, because especially
we had an earthquake last month that just it was my first one. It was really
and it's not like, the pipeline is solid. It's not like they can put hinges on it to, although they might at this point, but it's not like they can make it earthquake proof. If the ground moves, it's going to break that pipeline.
There's just as an idea about how close the pipeline is. Mm-hmm. If I walk out my door and I walk 2 minutes to my right, across the street, there's the pipeline.
Okay, so it is really close to you. It's literally in your backyard, or at least in your neighborhood.
If for anybody who lives in a normal suburban neighborhood with a normal sized backyard, it's in my backyard.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. I have a highway running behind my backyard.
Yeah.
But so I understand the issue here, I believe, and you're concerned, rightly so, that Kinder Morgan or no one else, nor no one else, can give you 100% guarantee that this will never leak and it will never have any problems and everything will be fine. Because if they could, and you could believe that, I suspect you wouldn't have an issue with the pipeline itself.
If it was, well, yes and no. I really do think it's a deep-seated belief that we need to divest from fossil fuels. Yes, that I don't believe that money. You can't eat money and you can't drink oil. When it comes right down to it, my bottom line is water. You can't drink oil. We need water. We need clean water. And with the fossil fuels, with fracked gas, which is, yes, a clean gas when you're burning it, but getting it is not clean. We already know what it's doing to the aquifers and what it's doing for earthquakes. And it's increasing more earthquakes already in British Columbia, which is not what we need, especially if they want to put a pipeline in. It's a lot of stupid decisions that our politicians are allowing to happen. And this thing called the NEB, the National Energy Board, which is a sham. And it is supposed to protect us against anything that would be an issue with the Energy Board. But they are pushing through the pipeline. And that's not what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be looking at the scientific reports and also.
Well, I was going to ask you, your local mayor's against it. You guys don't have states, but you've got, in my mind blanks.
Provinces.
Provinces, yes. And I assume that there is, an equivalent to a governor of the province.
Yes, that's called a premier, and
Okay.
right now our premier is Christy Clark. She's a liberal, and she is not my friend.
Okay, but she is for it. She's not against it.
She is for everything that will make her and her cronies money.
Okay, and then of course the national government
She
is
calls us the forces of no, N-O. We call ourselves the forces of no,
KNOW.
K-N-O.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Because we know what's happening, and she's being blind to it.
She's being a typical politician.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And of course, this is gonna, if it hasn't already, it's gonna boil up into a national debate. So where's the national government come down on this?
Our prime minister seems to be for the pipelines. He had said before that he was against the Keystone pipeline, but that he has always been for the Trans Mountain. But he has also said that these projects will not go through without community consent, that being First Nations and the various cities and towns that it would have to go through. And he said without consent they won't happen. Well, they don't have consent.
Okay, so basically, he's being a politician, and he's saying what you want to hear, and then doing whatever he damn well pleases.
Yeah, during his election, he had said all these. I wrote him, and he wrote me back.
You actually got a letter from the prime minister?
I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did get a letter back from him, and it was during the election, and it was just after I had been arrested, or just before the election, coming up to the election. It was after I was arrested, and I said, Justin Trudeau, what are your viewpoints on this, and what are you going to do about it? And he did say that he was against Keystone Pipeline, but for the Trans Mountain Pipeline. That has to do with China. It has to do a lot with China saying that if they don't get this pipeline, they're not doing business with Canada.
Okay,
So
so it comes down to money.
it's all about money,
Yeah.
which you have to eat.
Yeah, well, and then that's a fact of life. It comes down to money, and I understand your point of view. I don't disagree that you can't drink oil. I don't disagree that it would be wonderful if we could, if we didn't need to use fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, any of that. because there are cleaner ways of getting the energy we need. The problem at this point is cost. Again, it comes down to money.
But there is no problem with cost. Because if our government stopped doing stupid things like sending people to wars that don't need to be fought, we would have more than enough money. And we actually do have more than enough. With the Panama Papers, we found out there is enough money.
Well,
they're just it all.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the cost of if my local power plant were converted from coal to, say, solar.
Mm-hmm.
In order to recoup the costs of putting in those solar panels, or even if I just put solar panels on my house, that's going to cost half as much as what I paid for the house, and it would reduce my energy bill. If I have enough of them, it should reduce my energy bill to nil, but it would still take years.
What would be the brilliant is if the governments were giving subsidies to sustainable energy production rather than subsidies to oil companies.
Well, the problem is they've been, at least in this country, they've been doing that. Solandra Solar was the huge one, and they went out of business, and they got paid billions of dollars by the U.S. government. That was one of President Obama's biggest pet projects, and they went out of business. They went bankrupt because they couldn't deliver. It was not enough money. There was no such thing as enough money for them, and there are several others like that. I'm against. Huh?
There's other options too.
Well, yeah.
But where to end for those other options to happen.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of government subsidies to any company. I think that when the banks did what they did in 2007 and then found out the consequences in 2008, the government should have let them fail. Would it have sent us and the rest of the world into a depression? Absolutely, it would have. But then the banks that survived would have known better than they would have known then that they couldn't go to the government for a bailout. Now,
yeah, and it's tricky. It's really tricky. But I'm seeing subsidies to the military machine. I'm seeing not just your country, our country as well, and subsidies to oil companies and fossil fuel companies. And not the same level of subsidies to sustainable energy and enough support. Really, we need to get on this because the further that we go with it, on so many levels. With climate change, we're just making it worse. Yes, there's always been a variation in the climate, but never to this degree.
Yes,
we're really stupid apes.
Well, I cannot say for a fact, because I haven't looked at the data. I can't say that it's that climate change is man-made. I do know for a fact that climate change is happening because it's a natural part of the planet.
But never to this degree. Well, it does have to do with fossil fuel and methane gas.
The Earth has been this hot and warmer before. It certainly was 65 million years ago.
But not moved quickly. And what happened with those things? What disappeared when we had those great ice ages or whatever? What happened? We lost whole species of beings. Yes, this planet's going to go on, but yes. I'd like it to go on for humans.
And I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree that if the planet gets too warm, we will be one of those species to be extinctified, if you will, because unless we get off the planet, and while we have some of the technology, no one is willing to work together well enough to actually do that.
And you just hit the head on the nail for everything.
What, we're not willing to work together?
We're not willing to work together.
That's
why we have these issues, social issues, issues with colonialism, capitalism, and I know you're a capitalist. I'm a socialist, so it's a little bit, we have to work with it, but I understand it. I get it. Money doesn't make the world go round.
Right, and I agree. Everybody.
Not that I agree that it's the right thing.
Everybody is in it for themselves.
But I know that it's true.
Yeah, everybody's in it for themselves, and let's face it, that's human nature. Now, I've got a comment here from Beat Girl. She says that here in the U.S., a geological report or a cultural resources management report can stop something like this. Is that a possibility in your province? Do you have access to such reports?
There are the reports, and they may or may not help.
Okay. Okay.
That's because they're already in effect. And there's many reports on many things that I work with, like fish farms and things like that. But that's a totally different thing. We're talking about Kinder Morgan and the Trans Mountain pipeline
Mm-hmm.
right now. But and it's a difficult thing because this passion and my one, I have one focus. I have a hard time seeing the other parts because it's a spiritual thing, and I've been tasked with this thing, and so when the lady said this is what you're going to do, then everywhere I go, my last and only argument is water.
Which is not only a valid argument, it is the most valid argument.
There's also about water. If you're looking at the oceans, I don't know how old you are, but when I was born, there were 90% more aquatic life in the oceans than there are now.
Yeah, and I think I'm older than you are. I think we discussed this
We're
last time we
close.
met. Yeah,
I think,
yeah. And
but
you're right.
Just half a century ago, I'll just go with that.
Yes.
There were 9% more animals in the ocean. We're killing those off because we're killing the water.
And
we are killing off the salmon on the coasts in Washington with dams and oil pollution
and we also have issues with bees, which is near and dear to my heart because bees make honey, which I make into mead. Or at least friends of mine make into mead. So if you're...
We're going to have a pretty boring diet when the bees die.
Right. Yeah, because
we're going to have grain.
Yeah, not only do they make honey, but they pollinate all the other plants that grow for our food. So if they go, we go also.
Nice, chocolate's nice.
Yeah.
Bees, we need bees for that.
So, and anybody who takes any kind of look at this at all, and part of the problem that I see is that everybody looks at this little piece of it, okay? So, for example, most people are looking at this tiny little piece of it, which is this pipeline, and should it go through this mountain or not? And really, that's just a minuscule piece when you look at the entire whole of the planet and how everything is connected together. And
exactly, it's all connected.
Unless you can look at this holistically, which most.
Greyheart, can I just interrupt you? Can
Sure.
you hold that? I hate to do this, but I really need to take a bio break.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I will be 2 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you.
So while she's taking care of that, I will. And honestly, this is probably going to be. We're probably going to close up here pretty quickly because we've gone over at this point, and. So basically, and we've got actually 7 people watching at this point. That's kind of cool. One of the things I do want to talk about real quick is next month. We did a test tonight for Facebook. It ran for precisely 1 hour and then it stopped. I'm not sure if that's something on my end or on their end. I'll have to do some more tests. So we'll probably be testing both on YouTube and Facebook again next month. Next month, my guest is going to be Julianne DeVerde from Ye Olde Magic Shop, and we're going to talk herbs, flowers, poisons, and liminal spaces, because they are putting together on May 28th. They're putting together an event at the shop on liminal spaces. And so we'll be talking about that. So it looks like Sparrow has come back, so I'm going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and change this back to both of us here, and there you go. I can see you now.
Thank you.
So this is actually probably a really good place to close it down, at least for now. I would like to. I see your puppy.
Yeah, this is Watson. He's named after Captain Paul Watson of the Sea Shepherds.
I would love to get a hold of you and Mojo both in the future and have you back on, both about this as an update as well as other things that you're doing, because I know you guys are still podcasting, you're still doing stuff in the community, and part of this I'd like to find out as far as things that you guys are doing in your community that are similar and different from what we do in our community, since you're half a continent away. So
Yeah, would be an excellent idea.
yeah. So hopefully, what we'll do before next time is we'll do some tests on the hardware to make sure that it works right before we go live.
And with the laptop, then Moj and I can both sit in the same frame.
Yeah, exactly. And Beaker wanted to make sure and thank you for talking tonight. Apparently, she really enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the conversation. It was not what I expected it to be, as far as what the actual crux of the issue was going to be. I was thinking it was going to be, these crystal crunchies don't want the pipe going through their backyard because and really it's a lot more than that.
It's social justice, it's geography, it's geology.
It's the whole point of going through a protected area where the government has said, hey, this is going to be never going to be developed, and we're going to leave it natural, and that's what, and they made that promise, so they should have to keep it.
What I'd like people to do, just so they can get an idea, is pull up on their computers a map of Burnaby. And the green spot you see in the north part of the map is Burnaby Mountain. And you can see the green conservation area and where people live. And we live on the south face of the mountain.
I can do better than that. You go ahead and talk. I'm going to pull it up on
And and so you can see that it is beautiful. I wouldn't say it's pristine, but it's beautiful, protected area, and bears do live here, and all kinds of wildlife. There's the Burnaby eagles. There are about 6 or 7 eagles. I think there's one group that doesn't have a pairing, and they fly over the area every day. And you just see those beautiful eagles soaring. And
well, I've got a map of Burnaby up now. Okay. So we can see Vancouver on the coast. And let's see. Yeah, you can. They can see my cursor. I'm showing Burnaby here. There's a Burnaby Lake.
And if you look north of Burnaby Lake.
Yep. Up by 7A.
Go more north of 7A.
Yep.
And you should see that it's a whole green space, and it'll say SFU on the top. It should, because there's a university at the very top of the mountain.
Okay, I see.
Whole green area.
Yeah, I see Burnaby Mountain Conservation Area.
Yep, that's where we live.
Okay, so that's where you live. So you are just east of Vancouver proper, and so as people can see, it is literally right on the coast, and I understand, but what I don't understand, because the pipeline's coming from the east. Couldn't they go farther close to like Port Moody or something where the water are there no ports that far east?
No, not as far as Port Moody. The terminal and the tank are on the mountain.
Okay.
That's why. That's pretty much why, because they already have the existing infrastructure, which, by the way, is considered critical infrastructure. And there are certain parts of our neighborhood we can't even take pictures.
Really?
Because of Kinder Morgan.
Oh, because of Kinder Morgan, not because of okay. Wow, okay.
Yeah, because of Kinder Morgan. We can't take pictures of anything on the tank farm. There's a couple...
Okay, because they're worried about terrorism. They're worried about somebody taking a match and lighting up their tanks.
Mm-hmm.
That does make some sort of sense. So, all right, so let's go ahead and I just saw hi Eileen. I just saw your comment. The government keeping a promise? Ask the American Indians how well that works.
Well, or the Canadian First Nations, same thing.
Right.
It's I would hazard a guess that, and I've been told that the American First Nations are treated slightly better than the Canadian.
Really?
Look up Ottawa-Piscat.
Okay.
ATTAW, Ottawa, Piskat, and it's third world country in Canada. It's a reservation where on the weekend 11 different people tried to commit suicide, and it's a small community.
Yeah.
11 people, from 71 years old right down to preteen.
Okay.
It's a horrible, horrible conditions. And that's how Canada treats the First Nations who live on reservations. Some are livable, many are not. No water. There are some millennials who have never had tap water.
Okay.
They've only had bottled water, and because there's no safe water on their reservation.
Okay. Well, Sparrow,
25 people that never tasted tap water.
Right, right. Well, that may not be a bad thing, depending. But I really want to thank you for being on tonight. I want to thank you for bringing this whole subject up, because it is important. And while it may not affect me personally, because it's nowhere near me, it will affect me because I am connected to the rest of the planet, and because I know you, and there are people around the country and around the world who know me. We're all affected by this in one way or another. So hopefully,
everything is connected. Everything is part of the web.
Yeah, and so hopefully, what happens is that people who physically don't have a connection to that will see a spiritual connection, and maybe throw some support or at least lend some energy your direction, so that things go well. We're witches and various other pagans. We have this ability to cause change.
Well, that's the thing. Whenever I go into a direct action or a protester or a march or any of that, I treat it as ceremony, as ritual. There are certain clothes I wear. I smudge myself before I go. I meditate or journey or pray. Any one of the three. It depends on how I'm feeling. And I get myself into that mindset and that space, into a spiritual space before I go, so that I interact with my fellow protectors and also the RCMP and maybe the people that we're protesting or protecting against. We prefer protecting. So that I'm in the right space, and so I have my gods behind me and guides.
Right. And so because we are spiritual people, and because we understand more about what's going on, and that everything is connected, maybe some of us or a lot of us will start maybe doing a little bit of magic, and see if we can't get things to move in a more cooperative manner, as far as what the people who live there want, because really that's what matters. I understand. I like I said, I have nothing against making money, but really it comes down to, do the people who live there want this to happen? If they don't, then it shouldn't happen. It's as simple as that.
Thank you. Thank you. And and if anybody's interested, on Facebook, there's a Burnaby Mountain page.
Okay.
That anybody can join. I'm the one who will click them in, and also you can find me on Facebook.
Okay. Yeah, I need to find you, because I found out you and I don't think are Facebook friends. We'll need to get
Sparrow Anderson, easy.
Yeah, we'll need to connect. But thank you so much for being my guest tonight. And we ran a little bit long, mainly because we had some problems at the start. So I wanted to make sure to get this out and get the full story recorded and put out there for people. So we went over. I'm going to go ahead and take you out of the picture here real quick and sign off. Stay on, and we'll talk afterwards.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And all right. So for everybody else, I like I said, I want to point out that next month I'm doing the show, and let me pull up a calendar real quick here. That will be on May 11th. This is going to be our next show. And now that I know how to set up events and other things, we'll have it a little bit. I'll get word out a little bit earlier in ways that people can actually be reminded that, hey, this is coming up. We have had about 10 people this month, which is twice the number we've had in previous months. I'm really happy to see that. We're building an audience. Next month, my guest will be Juliana Verde, who runs Ye Olde Magic Shop. And as I pointed out, we'll be talking about plants, poisons most likely, and liminal spaces. So until then, I just want to say good night, good day, and blessed be.